Just to finish up here, you've referenced a little bit of what Biden's done already, including the Russian deal. Do
Mhm.
you want to talk about that, and then also just how he's escalated in different areas? I know with Yemen, while he's been in office, Saudi Arabia has bombed them a few times.
Yeah,
I think 34 people have been killed. So do you just want to talk about that?
sure. Well, on Russia, I mean, Biden is a horrible hawk. He was in on the coup in Ukraine in 2014. He just rehired Victoria Nuland, who did that coup to help run the State Department's European affairs. I forget if they gave her the same job again under Obama. She was Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, which is
Mhm.
essentially ambassador to the EU, I guess. And they're giving her another, like position. That's Robert Kagan's wife. She's incredibly dangerous. And so I think that there's a very good chance they're going to try to bring Ukraine into NATO. And if they do, they could cause a horrible war. I mean,
Yeah.
talk about overreach, man. It's just, it ain't, it's so far outside of what is reasonable for
Yeah,
them to try to do that.
for who don't understand NATO and like the implications, can you just explain why
Sure.
that was bad?
Yeah. So after World War II, the United Nations was founded, but then essentially it was split in half in the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization for the US and the Western powers. And then the Soviets created the Warsaw Pact, was their military alliance of the Soviet republics and the satellite states, pardon me, that were conquered, in during World War II.
Hmm.
And so this was what they called the bipolar world during the Cold War. The Reds really controlled Russia, China, North Korea, and the US controlled everything else. America inherited all of the world empires of Europe and of Japan and became the dominant force in, you know, almost all of the rest of the world. Not in outright colonialism, but more like coups d'etats and political engineering, CIA manipulation, and control of lily pad bases, as they call them, spread throughout the world. It's an empire of bases more than outright colonialism, but you
Hmm.
don't really need to move American companies and American citizens and American equipment into Congo or wherever it is. You just have to pay off the right people to get the right stuff. So it's a not even a neo-colonialism, but a neo-colonialism under American so-called leadership, but
Hmm.
really military dominance. And so the idea of NATO was that this is how we keep the Reds out of Western Europe. This is how we keep the communists from conquering Western Germany, France, the Netherlands, and all of our friends in Western Europe. And it really wasn't necessary in the first place because the Soviets didn't have the power to invade Western Europe, and the West Germans and the French, they were able to defend themselves from a Russian land army attack relatively quickly. We didn't need to have our troops there, but the idea was, as they put it, keep the Yanks in, the Germans down, and the Russians out. And so, how do we prevent Germany from being the dominant power in Europe? We're the dominant power in Europe,
Hmm.
including our friends, the Germans. We treat them nice enough that they acquiesce to their role in our order, basically. And then the real problem with NATO, Liam, is that after the Soviet Union dissolved, America started gobbling up all those Eastern European states that used to be in the Warsaw Pact. They started bringing them into NATO. Well, it's not a social club, it's a military alliance. It says that if you get attacked by whoever, the rest of us have to rally around and promise to defend you. And so it's a war guarantee, essentially. And H.W. Bush in 1988 and 89, he promised Mikhail Gorbachev, the last premier of the Soviet Union, that America will not extend the NATO alliance 1 inch east of Germany if they would agree to withdraw from Germany. And Helmut Kohl, the leader of West Germany, and Margaret Thatcher, the leader of Great Britain, and I think it was Mitterrand, who was the president of France at the time, all agreed and all made the same promises. Same for James Baker III, who was America's Secretary of State at the time. All swore to God they would never extend the NATO alliance east. Well, Bill Clinton got in there, and that's what he started to do. And a lot of it was domestic politics, right? He needed Polish votes in Illinois. So he said, let's bring Poland into NATO. this kind of thing. And of course, Lockheed, the Lockheed Vice President Bruce Jackson put on a full court press and a massive propaganda campaign for NATO expansion so they could get rid of jet fighters at U.S. taxpayer expense and give them to all these countries. But the thing is, they even brought in the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, right on Russia's border. And they threaten perennially to bring Ukraine into NATO. Well, this would be exactly analogous to the Russians bringing Canada into the Warsaw Pact. Yeah. The reality is, we saw what happened when they put their missiles in Cuba. Jack Kennedy said, I will start a thermonuclear war before I let you leave them there. Remove them now, or it's on, is what happened in 1963 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Okay, so that's America's stance. You try to pull that stuff on us. You try to imagine Russia. Think of all the BS over, emotional reaction over Russia not meddling in the election of 2016, but just a bunch of stupid lies by America's FBI and CIA and Democrats along those lines and media. Imagine if they really overthrew the government of Mexico or overthrew the government of Canada in order to put in loyal sock puppets who would then move those countries into Russia's military alliance against us. America would launch its H-bombs and kill us all before they let that happen. Jimmy Carter would have. Ralph Nader would launch the nukes before he let the Russians overthrow the government of Canada and use a bunch of neo-Nazis to do it. Don't you love that? Victoria Nuland, Robert Kagan's wife, hiring a bunch of Nazis who are the proud descendants of the men who murdered the people that she's descended from in the Holocaust to overthrow the government in Kiev because, hey, business is business. If the Russians pull that in Canada, Washington, D.C. would launch every H-bomb we have until they were all dead. Simple as that. Simple as that. What's Putin done this whole time? Geez, our American partners sure are getting aggressive with their whole NATO expansion thing that I wish they'd back off on. Wow, what a cool customer. Can you imagine the trouble we'd be in if Vladimir Putin had emotions? Jesus Christ. Thank God that he is the ice-cold, throat-slitting sociopath that he is, man, because what if you made him actually angry? He never refers to the USA as anything other than our partners. Oh, thank God, this guy. Oh, man, it could be so much worse than him. But I'll tell you what, and I have a little bit of hope here, Liam, because this is the new head of the CIA, William Burns. Burns met with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, in 2000 and I'm going to say 9 or 10. It's in the WikiLeaks. Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, the great American heroes, even though Assange is Australian, leaked this. And the document is titled Niet Means Niet. And this is from a discussion that Burns had with Sergei Lavrov, where Lavrov says, listen, I know you guys want to bring Ukraine into NATO, but I just want you to understand, I think we could be in Kiev in 2 weeks. We will not allow you to bring Ukraine into NATO. Do I make myself clear? The line's been drawn. Don't you cross it. I'm not kidding. All right. Have a nice day. Okay. And then, so Burns sent the memo back to DC and titled it, Niet means Niet. Lavrov explained to me that, yeah, we better not. Okay. Yeah. This is our new head of the CIA. Oh, thank God. Right? Like, first of all, he has some kind of relationship with Sergei Lavrov where they understand each other. I like that. I don't know. These are pretty desperate times, man. We'll have to settle for what we settle for. It could have been much worse. Could have been Mike Morell, who said what we need to be doing in Syria is killing Russians. Right. That's the guy who almost got the job. Okay? And instead, it was William Burns, the guy who said Niet means Niet. There's a line that these people won't let us cross. They let us get away with overthrowing the government in Kiev, but they won't let us get away with bringing them into NATO. Yeah. And so, and actually, as I say, though, that was from 2009 or 2010. And then Robert Kagan's wife, Victoria Nuland, and Joe Biden, the vice president, overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014. So I'm not so sure how loud and clear they got that message. And that was clearly a means toward bringing them into NATO eventually. and causing a fight there to purge the pro-Russian leaning factions from power in the capital there. So